First of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming along this afternoon. We're going to try and make this as entertaining as possible because I appreciate we're after lunch and before your break, the afternoon break. So let's try and make it as informative as possible as we go through. So first of all, we're here, MoEngage. We're here to talk about a report that we commissioned early on this year. Some really interesting findings that came out of the back of that, and this is what the main purpose of today is to talk about. I'm Jason Smith. I'm the VP of Europe for MoEngage. And so today we're really going to talk about the Personalization Insights. So we did this report, half focused on the UK and also Germany as well. And there's some really interesting trends that we're going to talk about around the communication channels as well. So the good news, we're going to talk about the report and not MoEngage, because I'm sure you don't want to hear about MoEngage. So from the important perspective. So this is the research. We interviewed 1,000 consumers, and of those 1,000 consumers, 50 were split over Germany and 50 were split over the UK. And what we're looking to do is really, this online survey is really to look to how they engage with consumer insights, mainly around the sort of kind of holidays 2021. So the type of channels they were using, you know, how they differ from last year and everything else as well from that context. So a really interesting report. So this will probably come as no surprise to you, but for the consumer sort of kind of communication preferences, you know, what we've realized from there is, you know, email isn't dead. You know, email is still a channel that's, you know, it's been around for donkey's years, hasn't really innovated for many years, but it's still such a really important channel. So, you know, that currently constitutes about 32.7% of what the consumers feel is their best channels to engage with, and from that sort of side there. But what we're really noticing is, you know, the things like the mobile apps, text, SMS, in-app push notifications are really rising up compared to 2019 when we last did the report. So there's a huge lot of evolution, and depending on what product and service and stuff you offer, really pushes the sort of kind of the, you know, the chat, the WhatsApp. We're probably all experimenting it in some sort of format, not quite sure how to use it, but we feel it's an important channel we should be present in. So, you know, but from a consumer perspective, they don't really see that as an important channel yet. It's one they're opting in, but not heavily involving in. So when we look at sort of, you know, the communication with brands, brand communication, email is still the strongest in the market share so far. When we look at the sort of kind of new channel preferences, obviously we've had this wonderful thing called COVID going on for, you know, a little while now, we're all familiar with. And what we've noticed, that's forced consumer change in a very interesting format. So we've migrated to, you know, digital transactions, digital communication, and we're seeing a massive growth of apps in many markets. But what's really interesting there, you know, I guess the COVID effect is that we've seen mobile app that's been trailing since, you know, when we look at 2019 compared to this year, is now trailing sort of 21.5%. All these figures, by the way, are in the booklets on your seats and sort of stuff. They're on these charts, and we'll share the PowerPoint after the session anyway. So, you know, we're still looking at things like social media, 17.7. People have got more time at home, more time to browse and sort of stuff from that sort of scenario. Push notifications, we either love them or they hate them. If they do them right, they're a channel that people can love. But if you use it, as in some channels where they just batch and blast lots and lots and lots, it becomes a very ineffective channel, and, you know, and sort of kind of definitely points towards the sort of, you know, a lack of engagement sort of side there. But some really interesting sort of kind of adopted new channels since COVID. And I'm not sure, you're probably all finding you're probably all in digital teams, I assume, for the mobile side. So in all about that sort of kind of engagement channels and sort of perspective. So it's a really interesting format. When we talk about sort of kind of the falls, the creepiness ditch, we understand if you're communicating with customers, you know, it's, you know, if we're using insights, things we've gleaned off data, you know, data points on the websites or the mobiles, and then we're sort of kind of transferring that. So we need to sort of then communicate with these brands without falling into the creepiness ditch. You know, we've all heard about the sort of kind of horror stories, you know, the Target story where they did the pregnancy segment where they started then mailing, the teenage girl. They've got the other ones where the gaming analytics company, the New York report, the New York Times report, where it was very much seen as a bad thing because they were turning on the microphones to understand what TV channels they were watching. So, it's about using that insight-led engagement around in the channels without really sort of taking it to a certain, to a certain context there. So the brand knowing by sort of kind of location, permission, the brand wants to know what you're doing and what you viewed, but without being creepy from that perspective. So this is quite a common sort of nice little chart and sort of stuff there as well. So it's about the customer expects personalization, they expect the relevant offer through whatever channel you're using, they expect the content to be right, engaged by you, but with that sort of kind of borderline. So this is interesting about the customer preference around personalization. So I have all these customers there, and what's I think particularly interesting, they're 15.7% of people being recognized by name. Do we do that in communications? Do we do that on an app perspectively? Do we not on an email perspective? But based on previous purchase history, there's quite a large of 26%. So we think to a certain extent that people don't want to be, intrusive into their privacy, but there is a level of expectation here, and based on interest, 21.3%. That's quite an interesting sort of kind of format where there is an expectation from the customer that you're going to engage with them in a certain way, and you need to really sort of perform to that. So so there's some quite interesting statistics here, and I don't know whether this is higher, lower than that you were expecting yourself, but it's it's certainly something on the increase, and that's where it comes into the omni-channel and the personalization side, which we really need to drive into. So let's move on to the sort of kind of customer frustrations, because that's a really sort of kind of key element. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he said the thing that really frustrated me was they bought a very expensive item in a store and then got a mailing list a month later with that very expensive item then at discount. And for that reason they'll probably never buy that luxury brand again, because it was that they wanted this item and now it's really frustrated them. So it's about that consistent messaging across all the different channels whichever ones you're engaging in. So the same brand sort of depending on the communication with me, web, mobile, so they're expecting that. So, that whole moving away from a customer-centric approach from a siloed data approach or channel-centric approach, it's really important so that we can sort of kind of drive that engagement. So wherever they are, I mean, we all follow this mantra, don't we? To be able to communicate with the customer in the right channel, they're present with the right message at the right time. But but there's a level of, as you can see from the report here, there's a level of expectation from the customer that you should know and should communicate in that way. So when a brand doesn't understand or remember your preferences, it's an element of quite big frustration, 16.3%. It's so they're expecting you as a brand to know that they've bought a certain item, or they've opted in for this particular categories and everything else as well. When we look at sort of the brand sends you irrelevant content or products, the 26.6%, that's 25%, just over of people want, then get really frustrated if the wrong content and sort of stuff comes through. When a brand sends you too many of the few messages, or too many or too few messages, interesting one. We all get bombarded, we all feel overwhelmed, and it's an easy way to just then subscribe. It's very easy, especially in the iOS thing, right at the top of the page, just to click on subscribe, and then you've lost that customer if you spend too much. So it's finding that balance. And then also when the brand doesn't personalize an experience to you, that's really important. Smaller than the rest of them, but still really important that they want you then to follow through and have that personalized experience. So the consumer future expectations. This is really interesting. Sort of communication shop more online. So pre-COVID, that's what they were looking to do. They're really looking to this new engagement sort of strategy. So communicate with shops more online, communicate more in person. This is pre-COVID, what they're expecting to go back to. When that's going to happen, who knows? But normality will, I'm sure, at some point come back to us all. And also the hybrid. So there's quite a fair, consistent sort of kind of split between communicating shop in person to communicating shop more online to the hybrid approach. So the two top ones, that's the expectation of they'll never perhaps get back to the fully integrated high street stores. It'll be either a hybrid or shopping more online, which is why we really need to sort of kind of focus on our strategy and stuff for that. So this is the sort of kind of key takeaways. So I keep looking behind me. As I said, this isn't working for some reason, but as I said, so I'll sort of keep looking behind from that side. But the consumers have high expectations about communications from brands. The customer experience can make or break a leading of customer frustration. Every individual is unique, and we'll go into some scenarios and stuff around that very shortly. But dealing with a consistent and relevant, well-timed experience is really important. And post-COVID, the majority of customers are more likely to engage with brands across multiple channels. So the bottom line, personalization and omnichannel marketing will become even more critical to engage customers in a different, to differentiate in the future. So the challenges for that consistent experience, we all know what they are. We touched on a few of them earlier. The ability to have or to move away from, tech or a problem. We're looking at siloed channel strategy. We're also looking at, data in different places. The mobile engagement sort of strategy is different to the email strategy, different to the on-site strategy, different to the social strategy. So it's about coordinating all these things together because there's one central customer view. So, we're heavy reliance on IT. And too many sort of kind of MarTech tools, silo channels. I'm sure you probably experienced that. To try and pull a decent segmentation. If one customer engages on the website and also the mobile app and also with the offline channels, to try and pull all that into one particular place. So we need to look at the sort of kind of enriching that data so we can have a better understanding of what customers are viewing across all the different channels and sort of stuff there as well. So the top 5 trends for driving the customer experience. So first of all, a holistic customer view. I'm not sure, show of hands, has everybody managed to get that holy grail yet within their businesses, that holistic customer view across all the different channels? If you are, I'm not expecting it. Very few people would actually put their hands up about that one anyway. Everybody wants it, but nobody does. Using AI to enhance that, and optimize that data set. That's something we'll touch on in a bit. But, if you've got enriched data, that gives you huge value, and you can then use that enriched data then to drive it to the next level. So looking at behavior patterns from them compared to other people to understand whether that customer is likely to churn in the future, not based on where they are than sort of stuff today. So you can do preventative strategies and sort of stuff to drive them around. Digital transformation, it's an overused buzzword, but been around for many, many years. We need to change. We need to do something. Some companies are moving faster than others. Others are moving not quick enough. So the personalization, the ability to engage the customer in a unique way. We all need to stand out. Competition is fierce online, especially in some particular verticals, if not all verticals in some shape or form. But, that way to do that at scale on a one-to-one level is the mantra everybody's kind of following to. And that omnichannel, the moments-based experience across multiple channels. Again, it's that real sort of kind of drive to be able to communicate the customers across all the different touch points and all the different sort of channels from that sort of side. When we look at the personalization engine, this is a customer view. So this is the dream that we want to look for all particular customers. We want to have every single event item of what people have looked at, everything people have bought, how they've engaged with certain strategies, how they've engaged with the campaigns, into one sort of kind of cynical view to understand leveraging that data to enrich the campaigns moving forward. I'm sure this is a chart you're all fairly familiar with. This is something we put together a little while ago, but ultimately it's to identify the different purchase cycles. I come across lots of people who are very much focused on acquisition, 90% activity, acquisition, and nobody really has a strategy then moving forward about how do we retain that customer? How do we then turn that customer from acquired to retained to loyal? The dream of every brand is to have customers that love you, not just like you or need you. It's about taking to the next sort of stage, and it's a strategy. It's a strategy change that there's only been one company that I know have put their hand up around somebody who's got loyalty on the board. Who owns loyalty on the board from a direction from that perspectively, and very few companies do, apart from Ford Motor Cars, I think was the only exception. So moving from that window shopper right the way through to first purchase, through to repeat purchase to a loyal customer. And then if they drop off to a lapsed customer, their behavior changes, they stop doing what they used to do, and they're following certain behavior that is like to be a lapsed customer, to have a strategy to then re-engage with them and pull them back. So, everything around sort of then back to the purchase cycle and keeps going around. So it's building programs and strategies around this kind of full customer life cycle. Understanding your customer behavior at every stage of the journey. We've just touched on it now, to be able to analyze that data and understand based on their behavior and identify opportunities. Moving into next to the segment to be able to then pull out a segment of those customers and then build a certain specific campaign or strategy based on where they are on their journey. Then we look at engage. How are we going to engage them? If the customer's on the app and only the app, then we need to engage them in that strategy. If it's a cross-channel strategy, making sure that if you do engage them in a cross-channel strategy, you've got that consistent message that goes through all those different sort of mediums. And then obviously personalize. We spoke about it. There's an expectation that you personalize. Know what I've looked at, know what I've bought, know what I've viewed, know what I like. You need to be able to personalize that at scale. And obviously, most importantly, optimizing that, experiment, A/B test, and everything else as well. So it's all these things as part of that collective sort of strategy that's really important. So I'm not sure who does user path mapping in a mobile app. So you're all from the mobile app sort of side there as well. But this is a real interesting way to look at segments. So layering the data on top. So looking at segments, looking at their journey through the particular app, looking for bottlenecks, looking for drop-off points, and see how and see how those pivot points and sort of stuff come into it. I'm not sure if anybody's doing this currently at the moment, but just really looking at those particular touch points, of first purchase, filling the form in, why people are abandoning the baskets. Is it too complex? What's the drop-off point? Is there a collective sort of routes? And this is really can kind of help back and analyze and use that to sort of kind of drive back and sort of stuff as a business to remove those bottlenecks. And it really does work. The other sort of scenario is RFM. Recency, frequency monitoring sort of stuff, the monetary sort of side. This is a really good way to help you base segment of customers that are or likely to do something. And again, I'm not sure whether you're doing this and sort of stuff there at all, but it's a really good way of looking at those pain points, looking at people moving between different segments here. As you can see, you've got recent users, you've got people who are about to sleep, loyal customers. What makes those loyal customers loyal? What's the bit that's before that makes them loyal? Is there a particular product or service they're buying that drives them towards that? So all these kind of creating those dynamic segments automatically and then having an engagement strategy sat over the top of it is what's really important. So and then you can spot the performance trends and modify those as and when you need to. So we're talking about the orchestration journey, and especially with mobile. So we've analysed. So we've started at the top. We've looked at our segments. We've looked at our current customers that are actually moving through the app. Now, when we want to do that is we want to then define that in a perfect journey and a perfect communication sort of strategy. So you start with what's happening and then build the perfection sort of stuff on top with a strategy from that side. So, it's a mix of, acquisition, a mix of sort of paid and organic sort of touch points. We've got digital, non-digital touch points across there. So we effectively have this whole workflow of somebody comes in, first notification comes through, they open, drive through to the next one, and, pushing relevant content each time if they're engaged or not engaged. So it's building those, those campaigns, those journeys, those flows based on whoever the customers are and having all the different variants and stuff in place for it as well. So building that experience, AI can automatically select the best channel. That's something that's proven really interesting at the moment. Next best channel, next best, what's the best content for that particular person? Where's the best time to send that communication side? If you look at an app side, it's not necessarily in the morning you should communicate. It's perhaps looking at each customer and say, well, that's where their behavior are most likely engaged on the app. Let's send it at 7 o'clock. Somebody else might be 8 o'clock. Somebody else might be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's looking at all these different sort of strategies per a customer level. And it can really sort of kind of journey those segments and sort of stuff and driving those key metrics. So the engaging customer, the multi-channel strategy. I mean, this is what we're faced with today. We've got one customer, and this potentially might be their touch points with a brand. So it's pulling all that together to make sure that consistent message, whether they're looking at a wearable through to a push notification. The expectation is that strategy needs to follow through. And as I said, I've come across very few businesses or very few brands that actually manage to achieve that across all the different touch points. So that's me. As I said, we're booth number 8. And as I said, we've got some Christmas decorations, which you've got in your chair. We've also got some velvet Christmas trees, some nice grey velvet Christmas trees, which need to go today because Christmas is coming and we don't want to take them back with us. We're also doing a prize draw to win a pair of Ray-Ban Stories, which is like the Snapchat glasses, but Ray-Ban version. So pop over to booth 8 and we're doing the prize draw later. And then I'll just want to open up to questions if anybody's got anything they'd like to discuss. Everybody's been very quiet this afternoon. Any questions, qualms, or anything I've been through? I appreciate there's quite a few slides to rattle through.
Like you mentioned about Germany and UK with the survey, like what was the specific, like you saw, like on, I don't know, is it some consumer behavior differently or it was something that...
Do you know what? It was quite well matched. We kind of thought initially our sort of kind of gut instinct was going to be generally as a region, there's going to be more of a mobile first adoption in the UK and more on email in Germany. It was actually 50-50. So, there's still a big drive around here. And I think, Germany's got a plethora of mobile first type technology now. So out of all those consumers, it was 50-50, where historically it was actually tipped the other way. But I would say it's pretty much level now. Any other questions or any points you want to raise? Is anybody going to win the Ray-Ban glasses? Is anybody wants to win the Ray-Ban glasses? I think they're pretty cool. We're trying to come up with a prize that was fun. And, as I said, it was, and Ray-Ban Stories with what I came up with. Rather than that and a drone, because I think you've got to have a pilot's license for those now, haven't you? We don't want to be causing any death and injury during the course of the event. So, but Ray-Ban glasses would be great. However, I think that probably then stems into the creepiness bit I was talking about earlier, wasn't it? About, walking around with sunglasses on with little cameras on. It borders on that little area, and I said, I can say that. I spent many years working at Google and Facebook, I don't want to talk about that. So it's when it comes to creepy and intrusive. Good, fantastic. So nobody got any other questions? Brilliant. Well, I'll let you go for your afternoon coffee. As I said, on the chair is a nice booklet with all the screenshots and sort of stuff that we were talking about earlier. We'll also share the PowerPoint and sort of stuff there as well. And get yourself to booth 8, drop your card in, and win your Ray-Ban sunglasses. We're going to put that out later. Fantastic. Thank you.